Hey friends and hopefully family, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com and welcome back. I know it's been a minute since my last video and I appreciate those of you who've reached out to me. I've had a few unfortunate discoveries and so I had to take a little time to absorb. However, I am tired of feeling tired and so I decided today would be a great day to do a video that's been on my mind for a little while. Oh, and also to start my new lease on life, I cut off all my hair. I was tired of the drabbled lady ponytail that just bored me, so I got this new haircut. Okay, so today I thought I would do a video which I think would be helpful, especially for my descendants someday, to understand my perspective on spells. And it's an interesting story that I think family probably would be more interested in hearing. But for those of you who are not family, but my channel is kind of like my family, you're more than welcome to hang in there and listen. Years ago, and I'm talking like 45 years ago, something like that, when I was a freshman in college, one of the first projects we had to do was we were handed, I don't know, like 10 pounds of clay. It was whatever it was, a big block of clay. And we were told, this was for our sculptor, I guess our sculpting class, to do something with this clay. Now, everybody else was very clever and they understood how to use the spinning, I don't even know what the correct word is, but they understood already how to use the wheel to make pottery wheel. But what did I know? I didn't know how to do anything. And I was just so intimidated by this big thing of clay. My strength was and remains, painting and drawing. But in those days, I didn't have any experience with a potter's wheel or anything like that. So I had to come up with something to do. We had like a week to create something with this block of clay. So I tried to spin it on the wheel and, I never had any lessons on it. So I was just trying to do it based on what friends were telling me how to do it and whatever. And I was getting nowhere really fast. So I decided to do something that I understood. So I got the idea of creating slabs that I would initially I had thought of putting it throughout the property of the college, of the university, because I figured, they would be interesting to have these things like just pop up and then to kind of be like a treasure map to find the next one and the next one. Sorry. But the campus was a little too big for that. I mean, it was a small campus, but it wasn't practical to have kids, the class trying to find these shapes. So I settled on a different configuration. But at any rate, I'm going to flip the camera. I found photographs of these. I took no pictures of anything in college. I have no photographs of it, but I have pictures of these. Go figure. So I thought it was interesting when I found them not too long ago, so I thought I'd share them here as part of this video, which will have a point, I promise. So I just came up with this idea of creating these slabs, and each one of them was probably about 1.5 feet, maybe 18 inches tall, something like that, 1 foot to 18 inches tall. And I thought of them as maybe like headstones, like somebody coming upon ancient headstones from somebody who lived a long time ago. And my idea was that it would be, they would be ruins of something from a long time ago. And in fact, I think I made one that looked like it was chipped and pieced back together, like this one, to be like artifacts or, headstones from somebody's grave, and that it actually told the story of their lives, or, a fragment of the story, because the whole thing wasn't intact. So that's what I came up with. And, it was a pretty lame ass thing, but I had these little markings, these little shapes, and they were not round. It was not like, you couldn't call it an alphabet, but they were very angular and almost like chicken scratch, And then I think one of my friends suggested that I just, rather than have them sporadic like a cemetery throughout the campus grounds, that just line the walkway, just so that it was easier for the class to see it. So at any rate, it was I thought it was kind of lame, But the interesting thing, let me flip the camera. The interesting thing was that the teacher rather, mentioned the word runes to me. And he said that, he thought that he gave me credit for knowing what runes, runes, were, which I didn't. And he was like, oh, this is like very, he thought it was clever. I guess at that time, 76, there wasn't too much in the popular culture. I'd never heard of what runes were. And so, he kind of thought it was interesting that I was doing this rune project, and what I heard in my own little brain was ruins, ruins. So I thought, well, he's making an awful big deal out of these ruins, because he thought it was kind of like unusual that I had even known about them, right? So I just played along and yeah. So I just kind of always remembered that funny little story about how the teacher, thought that it was so special that I knew about ruins. That's what I thought he said. And I got a better grade than I deserved, right? So a number of years later, I was a mother, and I came upon this book. Now, in the years since this book has been put out, there's many other much better sources for the topic of runes. But at the time, this was, the first time I saw that, and it dawned on me when I saw what was around, the book. I was like, that's what the teacher was talking about. So I, of course, had to buy the book. And then I read it, and I realized it was sort of, it was a type of alphabet whereby the individual symbols, represented a concept, maybe a sound too, but definitely represented a concept. And at any rate, it came with a kit. It came with a book and a sack of like plastic clay. I don't know what they were. I still have them. I don't have the bag, but I kept them in a box. So these shapes. And I played around with them a little bit, and I thought it was most interesting. And but of course, by then I was already into tarot, and my attachment to tapping into my unconscious was through tarot already. So I didn't take to these runes I didn't take to them because it's not in my DNA. This would have been like more Nordic or Germanic speaking cultures would have had a affinity for these. And these symbols in this particular book, I think this one was written in 82, yeah. And I have the 87, so I was already a mother, I got the 87 copy. But this was based on the Elder Futhark, which is the early Nordic or Germanic alphabet. And then they had like a younger Futhark, and then they have like an Anglo-Saxon Futhark, something like that. So they have 3 different examples of runes. Now, what makes runes different from our alphabet? That's a really good question, because as far as I know, and I'm definitely not an expert in this, I think that the runes, that's just what these folks called them. They called their alphabetic system runes. And I think they, as I mentioned, they may have had phonetic value, but they also represented concepts, which our alphabet also does as well. But perhaps because, I never really got the exact reason why they call these runes and not an alphabet. But ours is called alphabet because the the first two letters of our alphabet, alpha and beta, give us the name alphabet. But not so with the runes. With the runes, their alphabet is known as Futhark, which was the first 6 sounds of their alphabet. At any rate, I thought that was a funny little anecdote, talking about my college days, because that is how I learned about runes. I was thinking that the professor was talking about ruins and how clever I was to, and how worldly I was to know about these things. And I had no idea what he was talking about, but I just nodded my head, happy to get a C or whatever I got, or a B, and just happy that I passed, because I felt for sure I would not pass. And I guess, I don't know why I held on to these photographs, because of all the projects I've ever done in college. This were the only photographs I took, the only ones I had. And during that period of time, when I did get my hands on this book and I started playing with it a little bit, I bought, prettier stones. And I even took my hand to creating my own, and they're very simply done. I'll flip the camera and show. I very simply went to the dollar store or whatever and got those like glass half marbles, and then got a gold, and so I made some with silver, a gold and silver Sharpie, and just drew the shapes, the individual runes on the thing, and then I used some kind of spray to seal the letters or the shapes on it. And this one's probably, they're probably 15, 20 years old at least. Probably a lot older. I guess about 15 years old, maybe 20 years old. And they've held up. Now I don't use them very often, and I made gifts of them, and so it's a lot of fun. But at any rate, at some point, it got me curious about our own alphabet, and after all, language is extremely fascinating. There's so many different languages, and there have been so many different alphabets depending on where in the world. And it made me go down a rabbit hole of learning about languages. I'm the kind of person that when I have an insatiable love of learning, and usually one thing takes me to another thing, and that's kind of how I go through life. Now, the problem with me is that I have an atrocious memory. I don't really remember things very well. I remember snippets of things, I remember parts of things, I remember the gist of things. But I would always tell you that to go down that rabbit hole yourself to get more accurate information, because sometimes the way I remember something isn't always accurate. So I started going down the rabbit hole about our own alphabet, and as I mentioned, alpha and beta, name our alphabet. And from what I understand, from what I remember, I think our alphabet's about 5,000 years old, maybe 4,000 years old, something like that. Probably, and in the course of history, just as though the runes are their own special alphabet or system for language in the Germanic and Nordic cultures, the alphabet that most of us know, if you're listening to me and you're hearing me, you probably participate in the alphabet that I do. It's evolved and come from other sources too. I wonder if there's really any alphabet that's pure, right? Anybody who's ever encountered, because in those days if people traveled and they wandered around and they said, oh my gosh, those folks over there, they got this system, and it's so cool. And, I guess the Egyptians probably had the earliest system for language, which was the hieroglyphs, whereby every symbol had a, meant a word, not necessarily a sound. But then other folks, maybe they adapted that language, that hieroglyphs, and they also, put the sound to the shape, to the meaning of the word, until eventually, as people encountered that language or that alphabet, They took what they wanted, they borrowed what they wanted, and they took it to their people, and they made and adapted the alphabet until they were able to communicate with words in written form. Now, when you think of that, it's a really amazing accomplishment that humanity came up with, right? To be able to not just grunt and speak sounds that other people can understand, that's an amazing thing. But to be able to read a concept without sound, that's almost in some ways even more amazing, right? I think so, anyway. And as I mentioned, many alphabets appeared throughout history, and it's reasonable to assume, I think, that some cultures modified existing alphabets to suit their societal needs. I just want to touch on this. Our current alphabet was probably developed by Semitic language-speaking folks around 4,000 years ago and refined and spread by the Phoenicians, and each symbol of our alphabet represents a sound. However, just like the hieroglyphs and just like the runes, if you go back far enough with our alphabet, we'll see that certain letters represented certain concepts, and the concepts began with that sound. For example, our A, its sound was Aleph, which represented the sound for the word ox, right? So you can see that our A, we just inverted it, and that's how it ends up today, but this is how it started out. And it was a symbol for the word ox, which was Aleph, which was the sound for the A. B was like a box, and I think it meant house, something like that. Now, I'm drawing them the way they were drawn 4,000 years ago, or however thousands years ago, but obviously it's evolved, it's changed to the how we accept it. We understand it now. I'm just showing you a few of the ones that I think are interesting. The letter K was like the hand, right? Which is kind of interesting. M was more like this, which was the sound for water, right? N was for snake. Now you would think that N, the S, well, snake, right? You would think it would be the S, but at any rate, N, S evolved from something else. So that's not the shape for our sound N. Reminded them of the shape of a snake, and it made the same sound, for snake, whatever that word was that began, that made the same sound as N for snake. H looked like a fence, which was the sound, I guess, for whatever fence meant in that language. It sounded like huh. It started with that sound, and I think those are the ones that I remember. Ox, this Aleph, the sound for B for house was bet, I think. I forget what K was, but it was the sound for K. M was for water, the sound that, the beginning sounds of water. N for snake, and H was the sound for, that we know, ha, and it was the sound that began with the word, the fence began with. So I thought it's very interesting. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because I'm trying to express how spells, or the idea of doing spells, started with me. Because I started to see organically on my own, from that runes pottery story, took me down all these rabbit holes until I finally was starting to see our alphabet and how it must have been very magical. And then it occurred to me that the word spell which we use to say I'm doing a spell. What's it mean? It means, what's a spell? A spell is something expressed with words. And so I started from that point understanding the power of words and language and writing letters. And that's when I started creating spells. And for me, it's always been this way. And if any of you have known me for a while, especially if my family sees this, and it'll hit a nerve, probably you'll remember, that I try to be very particular about the words I use and how I express myself. I don't casually say things that I don't mean. Sometimes in exclamation, we all say things like excitedly, and we don't always protect our words or whatever. And sometimes, especially, I notice if I'm angry or if I'm annoyed or if I'm not having a good day, is sometimes if I say something that I regret saying, I'll erase the words. I take away the words because I don't want the words to exist, So if, say, for example, I'm texting to one of my kids and I say, I'm so upset with so-and-so, and I say something that I regret saying, I'll eliminate those words. I erase the text so they don't exist, because if you put something out there in text form, is my belief, if you put something out there in letter form, it's a spell. And you put it out there. And so we're not all perfect, and sometimes we say things that we don't really, mean. And I consider it damage control to eliminate those words, or to eliminate them. So they existed for a period of time, they did their damage for a period of time, and then you eliminate those words, take them away. And of course, if apologies are needed or whatever, you apologize and you make restitution if possible or whatever. But I try to go through my life keeping those things to a minimum. Now, I'm going to show you over my shoulder. You may notice a little flickering back there in a candle. I usually always have a spell going on, and they're always using the written word. So I write my intention, and I fold it, and I put it in a candle, and I let the candle run its course until the candle expires. And then I sometimes will take the collection after, like a year's worth of spells. I'll collect them, maybe I'll burn them. So I let the spell last on the piece of paper long after the candle expires, but I don't throw them away. When it comes to the time when I have so many of them that it's ridiculous that I'm filling a box, I'll take them usually on a special day, and I'll burn them, and I'll just release them all out there. And my box of intentions and my spells are always for positive, never do harm. And I even, as I mentioned, even if I'm just talking casually and I say something that I feel I regret, even though it wasn't intended to be a spell, I still hold on to the idea that words are magic and words have power. And I try to minimize damaging words altogether. I will rarely, if ever, type out or print anything to suggest a negative outcome. I mean, if a fact is a fact and something happened, I'll explain a fact that something happened and something went down. But that's quite different from spelling out or, anticipating a future event. Anyway, that is my orientation and my idea or my thought process on spells and how magical words are, and the forms of the letters and what they meant 4,000 years ago, and how we have received them and used them today. The Roman alphabet or the Latin alphabet, which is the one that English is based on, and I guess most of the languages that aren't characters, is really a magical thing. And I think all of us have a responsibility to use it wisely. And Just think of signs like caution, right? When you see a sign that says be careful or whatever, that's like a spell. That's a spell to warn you and to, to be careful. It's a spell. It's an everyday spell. It's spelling out be careful. And look at all the, go through today and just do yourself a little fun thing and notice in your life, if you go out, especially on the road or just in your own home or just taking a walk, all the signs that can be understood as spells. Anyway, friends, I'm doing this because in a few days I shall have a deck of cards that may fall in tune with this theme. And I just kind of wanted to preface that with this little video. Until next time, friends and family, peace, stay well, be kind, and do no harm.